Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you for joining us. Appreciate the sponsors for having us out and hosting this amazing event. My name is Steve Philpott. I am one of the co-founders of Anzisha Consulting, and we have a very, very, very special guest that we want to talk about and kind of delve into some of what's going on in the intersection of athletic performance and the endocannabinoid system. So without further ado, I'll let my co-founder introduce himself.
My name is Earl Lawrence. I'm one of the co-founders of Anzisha Consulting. So we're both from Chicago. I currently reside in Brooklyn. And my intro to cannabis, it was based in a medical history from beating cancer to more than 20 surgeries over the course of 15 years. I was able to experience firsthand some of the good things that cannabis can do in the midst of restoring some semblance of normalcy and helping you to push forward despite anything you're going through. So academically, my background is mechanically engineering and marketing. I went to North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro. And after that, I went to Brooklyn to pursue a career in marketing, but also helping incubate businesses, develop businesses, and also help them achieve their goals. And now we're bringing that to cannabis. It's an intersection of the professional trajectory I was kind of already on and a skill set that I acquired over the course of working with one of my earlier mentors, Chris Meacham, out of Oregon, Spring Hill Farms. He introduced me to the prospect of professional skill development within the emerging cannabis market. And so watching it reach its maturity today is part of why we established Anzisha Consulting, and we try to reach out and connect brands like, Heisman with Ricky Williams to smaller entities that want to carve a way for themselves in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess my own kind of background. So for those who don't know me, I am a Marine Corps veteran. The Marine Corps was my introduction to the industry. In 2011, I came back from the longest Marine Corps deployment in U.S. history. And I had multiple injuries that required surgery and a lot of opioid prescriptions. Ironically, the college that Earl was actually attending was in the same state as where my base was. So while I was on these opioid prescriptions, I was having a lot of negative experiences. And, Earl said, come on down to the college. We got something here that's very common at college, and it may help you out. So kind of funny, Earl gave me like a 6-foot bong, a gas mask, and a gravity bong. And for 3 days, I didn't take any of my opioids. I slept. I ate a lot. But the thought in the back of my mind was we lose twice as many military veterans to actual mental health than we do combat. And if this is something that can help, I'll spend my life doing it. So I've been a researcher, public educator, working with athletes to kind of tell people about how important athletics is when it comes to cannabis. It's not just getting high. We're on the cutting edge of new science. So with that, I will let our guest of honor introduce himself. You want me to give a short bio, or you want to give
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. So my name is Ricky Williams, retired NFL football player. And I launched Heisman because a big part of my football career was, at the time, I can say it was marred by failing drug tests for cannabis. And it kind of became part of my identity. And way back in 2004, we weren't having these kind of conversations. There wasn't this kind of open-mindedness about cannabis. And I suffered a lot. I wasn't sure did I really just throw everything away for drugs? That was the narrative, that was the story. And, after further reflection, I started to think maybe there's another potential story that can be told here. And I became very passionate about studying plants, because when I grew up, I thought string beans come in a can. I didn't realize. So I didn't grow up close to seeing things grow or even appreciate different botanicals and herbals and how they can help us. My first introduction to botanicals, herbals was my stepdad was a Rasta. And so, and so going through all this, I had some time off because I retired after that. So I became very passionate about wanting to discover more about this plant. And so at the time, I found everything I could and I started reading. And at the end of the day, I felt empowered that I'm onto something. I didn't know exactly what. We didn't have the language we have now, but I knew I was onto something. And I felt that I was doing the best I could to take care of myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate that.
Yeah. That brings us kind of to our first question. You touched on it a little bit, but we want to know, what does Heisman mean to you as a brand, and kind of how does it align with your personal values?
Yeah. So the origin story, it's funny. I sometimes really think that the reason I won the Heisman Trophy was so that I could launch the brand Heisman, because it's a meaningful story. And I could call it the secret to my success from a specific story. I came back my senior year because I wanted to win the Heisman Trophy. So I put all my eggs in one basket. You know, my junior year, I led the nation in rushing and scoring, so I knew I was the front runner, but we know how that goes. So I come back from my senior year, and first 3 weeks of the season, like I'm banged up, girlfriend breaks up with me, and I'm just in a really, really low place. And my roommate's like, you know, it wasn't a 6 foot bong, but he said, you just need to chill. And I remember taking a couple hits, and I went upstairs and I laid on the bed. And within 15 minutes, the thing that hit me was I'm not obsessing about all the negative stuff that's going on. And in that clarity, I started to imagine myself like getting better, being better. And then the next 2 weeks, I had back-to-back 300-yard rushing games. That was a record at the time. And so from my personal experience, it was hard for me to say that this, like, there's something wrong with this. And I truly believe in, you know, of course, there's physical benefits, but for me, the most obvious was the change in mindset. And I feel convinced I would not have won the Heisman Trophy if I didn't have that necessary change in mindset.
Yeah, that's really profound, and it kind of leads us into our next point. The evolution of cannabis in sports. We just heard you, Al Harrington, other professional athletes that are advocates. The conversation is continuously, we weren't having these conversations before. My question for you is, reflecting on your career, how do you feel about the recent changes with the NFL and the NCAA policy around drug testing? And what do you hope to see in response to those changes from the sports organizations?
Yeah. So it's funny because if I went back to 2004 and someone said the NFL potentially is going to stop testing and I'd have been like, no way, no way. Okay. But we've moved so fast. It's kind of like, you know, what's taking so long. NCAA, that was massive. That was massive. And my hopes is that it opens up the conversation. You know, back to Earl's question, right? Heisman goes to the best player in collegiate football. And I had talent. I had a bunch of talent, but there's other stuff that gets in the way. And so our tagline is spark greatness because we all have some kind of talent. And a lot of times other stuff gets in the way. And I think when you can get to truly get to the underneath all that stuff and connect to like who you really are and get that clarity, I think it allows greatness to emerge. So I'm trying to destroy the stigma and flip it on its head and not say it's not bad, but there's the potential that this can open up something that people haven't even considered or thought about before. And so I think as the conversation opens up, that more athletes will start consuming cannabis, more athletes will start to appreciate the benefits of consuming cannabis, and more athletes will start to tell their story. And I think that changes a lot because part of the stigma in the past relative to athletes, it wasn't just like, oh, you know, my mom is going to ground me for 2 weeks, right? You know, it wasn't even just going to lose my job. It's I'm going to be publicly embarrassed. And as an athlete, you're supposed to be a role model. And when we grew up, the worst thing a role model could do is drugs. Yeah. So the stigma was so heavy, especially for athletes, because they had so much to lose if it came out or if they got caught that they were consuming cannabis.
One of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about and what's been interesting as we've conversed is the NFL and NBA specifically said that they removed cannabis from their drug testing programs. When the NCAA said that they were interested in removing cannabinoids and actually educating a harm reduction model to NCAA athletes, that was pretty profound in the fine print. What's your perspective on like implementing education programs similar to how they have alcohol? There's a lot of courses that you get as an NCAA athlete as part of education. How do you feel about cannabinoid education being a part of something that NCAA athletes can get?
Yeah. I again, based on what I just said, I think it's vital because there's been so much miseducation on one hand. On the other hand, athletes are, because we do something that's so stressful over and over and over again and how important recovery and performance is, it's like we're such rich subjects, you know, to get their own personal experiences of how cannabis is helping them or inhibiting their performance. It's kind of like, I think in times of war, you know, technology takes huge strides because you're doing something so difficult and so stressful, right? It brings the resources. And the same thing in high level sports, there's so much innovation,
Absolutely.
right? But cannabis hasn't been allowed to benefit from that innovation. And I think as these doors open and athletes are educated, because a lot of athletes I know, they smoke, but they have no idea what's going on. They don't have the language, right? They just say, I just feel better, right? And so I think with this education, it'll empower the athletes to be able to use this as a tool to increase the quality of their lives. Absolutely. Because so many times, the mental health issue is sometimes as a professional athlete or a collegiate athlete, you sometimes feel like you're just a object, a chess piece, and especially when they don't allow you to take care of yourself. And I think, cannabis can help that, because I think when you realize that you have rights and you're a human being, you can ask for those rights to be respected from other people. And I think that's an important part of this education.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's really profound in that the growth of the athlete becomes more of the focal point, not just utilizing them as an asset.
Yes. And I think to me, that's the biggest issue with cannabis, because when I got suspended, there was zero question about my well-being. Well, it was just that I was breaking a rule that they said I wasn't supposed to break.
The arbitrary rule of don't pursue your path to well-being.
Yeah, I think that's been one of my passions, just kind of in the conversations that we've had. My background in human performance and strength and conditioning, we're all about optimizing and pushing human performance, pushing athletes. They used to say as hard as you can go until you can't.
Yeah.
And when you look at the rest now in the NBA and the NFL, now we're like, by the time you can't, the body has already taken its toll. So now you have athletes that are interested in getting ahead of recovery. They want to know about ice baths. They want to know about whatever the latest superfood is. And it's very interesting that the potential for like the course like ACEs that we're producing for these NCAA athletes to actually educate athletes on their own. It gets people interested in their own individual health and wellness.
Ooh, wow. I mean, you said it, because, I'm reviewing the material, and cannabis is a tool, and it allows you access to other tools like body awareness. The biggest difference for me when I started a cannabis regimen as a professional athlete was when I was popping the Vicodins and the NSAIDs. I felt great, but I wasn't aware of what was going on with my body. Yeah. When I started consuming cannabis, it turned into 15 minutes before practice on the foam roller, trying to feel where my tension was. It turned into after practice, I go home and smoke and get on the floor and stretch and do a little bit of yoga and figure out where my tension was. And it translated directly, because when I was in the game, I could feel where the tension was. And when I was falling, right, I didn't think I'm invincible. I was like, this ankle's kind of tight. Let me take care of it. And I stayed healthy.
And that awareness is huge when you're job is performance. Yeah, that kind of goes into our next question.
Yeah, so with the integration of meditation and yoga and other somatic healing practices, how do you view cannabis as part of that holistic wellness regimen?
Yeah, so I remember the first time I was in college, hanging out at my friend's house, the first time I smoked and watched a movie, and it was Tommy Boy. Okay, and I see Tommy Boy before, and it was funny, but when I watched it this time, I laughed and I laughed and I laughed, And I thought about, why was it so funny? And I realized I was noticing things that I wasn't noticing before. Or sometimes after I smoke, I listen to music and I'll hear that backbeat, So cannabis can help increase our awareness. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sometimes why it creates anxiety for people, because they become more aware of things that they've been trying to push down. Absolutely. And so I think, meditation, it's a mindfulness practice. I remember the first time I just started doing yoga, and I just started cooking with cannabis. And I had this idea before my yoga class that I would put a little bit of infused ghee in my oatmeal and see what happened in class. Yeah. So I stirred about a half a tablespoon. I ate it. I went to class, and I was in the middle of a pose, and I could feel tendons and ligaments and blood vessels, right? I could really tune into where the tension was in my body. So you take all the years of athletic training with that heightened awareness and the amount of recovery and healing that I had access to. Wow, it was powerful.
I think what's really profound about what you said and some of the amazing conversations we've had is that combination between the perception of your own body, your awareness. It's interesting. The endocannabinoid system was technically on this planet in mammals and animals before cannabis existed. But it was through cannabis research and science that led us to discover the endocannabinoid system. So it's this very full circle moment where we're looking at, bears and other things that hibernate and have this, but finding out that meditation and you don't have to consume cannabis in order to positively supplement this system. So knowing that that's how important it is, it's not just consuming cannabis, it's not just yoga and meditation. This is why we're really curious. How do you feel about the perception of not medical, not recreational, but everyone kind of learning their own individualized health and wellness perspective? What you just said, some people have no awareness of feeling their own bodies. Some people have never felt these things. So like you said, having anxiety, how do you feel about getting into the broader field of health and wellness and, not just cannabis consumption, but crossing over the yoga practices into cannabis consumption practices?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a tool. And when I studied alternative medicine, it's like the root cause of all illness, they'd say, is just not knowing yourself. It's just a lack of self-awareness. And you can see, remember when I was playing Little League football, you could tell the kids that had no self-awareness, right? Those are the ones that didn't make the high school team. And so part of being a great athlete comes from this extreme amount of body awareness and this ability to focus at a high level when you're in the flow state, when you're in the zone. And there's been research done about people that have consumed psychedelics and cannabis about their ability to access altered states through meditation without cannabis, and it goes way up. So I feel like, symbolically, how we learned about the endocannabinoid system through cannabis, it's almost as if cannabis use wakes up the endocannabinoid system.
So as someone who's experienced the evolution of cannabis in sports, what's your vision of the future of cannabis use and beyond, from somatic healing to youth and picking up the sports, but also the wellness?
I mean, I'm going to sound like a zealot when I say this, but I don't feel like it. I'm just been around high level sports, and I know any edge that they can get, they're going to look for it. I think you're going to see cannabis regimens be like part and parcel of doing any high level sport. I think it's gonna infuse, because especially when the doors to research open, because right, it's been a dark age. It's been a dark age when doors to research open and they realize how beneficial this can be. Right, I can't see high level sports not exploiting that information.
In the meantime, something that we actually wanted to talk about is one of the things that we've been working on as Anzisha Consulting is we meet more and more athletes in high performance populations that are individuals who can benefit from this type of stuff. So not just athletes anymore. Now myself as a Marine Corps veteran, well, that Marine Corps veteran then relates to that first responder. That first responder relates to that healthcare worker who's tired from COVID. And we realize that what we're talking about is stress reduction and performance optimization. That's been my whole career.
Yeah.
One of the quotes we have is your greatest asset is your availability and performance.
Yes.
You could be a $500 million running back if you're scoring touchdowns, and the moment you get hurt, your asset drops. So when you're in that small margin of error type career, the stress is high. Ugh. And I think something interesting, we talk about the mental health rates in the military. Most people don't know that suicide is actually the second leading cause of death in NCAA athletes. So this is peak performance, our 18 to 22-year-old kids that we send to college for some of the best time of their lives, and we just kind of ignore that number. And I think that number is really profound as a veteran looking at these high performance and stress reduction. And I think that's another way that people will kind of become more open-minded, because that's not something that you can ignore. We lose a lot of really good athletes after their career, young athletes during their career, and as a veteran, I see the connection so easily, and it's stress that we're fighting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's like you said, and it's like NFL is entertainment, right? But also it's I was saying this yesterday. It's a celebration of doing something that's really, really difficult and really stressful. And again, Earl's question about the voice and the mission behind Heisman is, I realized as an athlete that I was doing a lot of damage to my body. And I realized in order to have a decent quality of life, I have to use the same kind of intensity in the ways that I take care of my body and become aware of my body. And I started to think about recovery and performance, like availability, right? Because if you have all the talent, but you're not available, you can't access that talent. Is useless. And if you can't recover to be able to do the same thing at that high level the next day, then you're going to see your performance go down and down. Absolutely. And I think, right, the negative stereotype about cannabis is people who aren't doing anything, so they have too much recovery. And if you ain't doing shit, what do you need to recover from? And so for me, the conversation and the push to Heisman is yes, right? You need to recover, but what have you done where you need to recover from? Or right, there's also an effect of cannabis, the sense of engagement. You know, like when I read something after I've consumed, I'm like in it. In it. So this idea of a tool is used for something.
Yeah.
So I like to see the conversation, and these are the conversations we try to bring up is what are you using this tool for?
We have our first question.
Is this good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm an ex-athlete, out of shape, and I'm looking to get back into shape. And so I was wondering from your perspective at your level of performance, do you have a basic routine for me not to re-injure myself, or is there something that you would advise for anti-inflammatory recovery, any sort of thing that you do specifically for that?
Yeah. There's a lot of movement practices that are less harmful to the body, like Pilates, yoga, Zumba, etc. On my journey, I became a yoga instructor, and I found exactly what you said. It's something that I can do where it's taking care of my body in a very profound way, but it doesn't put me in the way of re-injuring old injuries and stuff. Because to me, those kinds of practices, especially if you're an athlete, they serve two purposes. The first purpose is we spend so much time with our minds focused on our bodies. So it's a source of, I'll call it joy, just getting sitting with your body and reconnecting and using your mind to move your body and get it to do the things you ask it to do is a sense of joy, but also the awareness you bring to your body, right? With that awareness, you get more blood flow, you get more activation, you get more of the anti-inflammatory effects. So any kind of what movement practice like that, because if you learn it to a certain point, you can do it in the comfort of your own home. If you learn a couple of postures, something that you can do anytime you want.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have practice.
Yeah.
It's very basic.
Yeah. I mean, my practice is sun salutations. Every morning I do 7 rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. That's a great example.
Perfect for now.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
To me, it's even if you just do 5 to 10 minutes a day, it adds up, right? And that 5 to 10 minutes a day, it's cumulative, right? Your body can build on that and do something.
Totally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, great question. No, so
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you guys have more conversation with athletes, are they developing a language to be able to talk about and understand what's going on?
I think it varies by demographic, especially age group. So some of the retired athletes, they've started to look into, cultivating an environment that they can recover from that trauma that they put themselves through, because they recognize that it's probably not the best practice for me to do every day, but recovery becomes a bigger portion of the conversation. And so their terminology, I don't think it's caught up with conference cannabis, but it's definitely elevated in terms of being a high performance population and focusing far more than the average individual would on pursuit of wellness and recovery. And so the same way they're ice baths and meditation, they're getting into the different types of healing. So topicals and not just smoking. I think that conversation is starting to become more nuanced, but it's getting into the niches of higher end athletes. So when Kevin Durant, for instance, can say that this helps him, other basketball players can look up to one of the peak athletes in that field, know that it's not an outlier, their performance. It's not something to be, demonized or.
Yeah. And I would say from my perspective, having been a D1 strength conditioning coach, being a sports scientist, athletes are always coming to me asking about an edge. They're asking me, hey, did you hear about this new product? I'm like, hey, you know what's in that? Don't take that. Hey, what about this new product? Hey, berries have antioxidants too. So these are common conversations. So when athletes have Fitbits and all this data that they're getting, you eventually get to a point where they're like, what's something that's non-toxic? What's something that I can consume that won't impede my performance, impede my sleep? Because any pill has some type of side effect to it. And when I find out that I'm like, hey, I'm a strength coach, and athletes are already coming in kind of smelling like it, a lot of them have that personal experience. And when you talk to them about things they already know, like Earl said, recovery and different things like that, you kind of teach them hey, it starts with CBD, curiosity because it's legal. And then that just kind of goes into this, hey, there's cannabinoids, there's this system. And I think athletes are actually excited, especially when you see some of the public deals that are going on as far as sports marketing and things of that nature. Food and beverages are some of the biggest sports marketing. And with cannabis being a consumable, it's pretty inevitable at this point that it's going to end up being part of that. So that education is going to be there because athletes will be talking about it.
Yeah. So that's why I see what we're doing as being so important, because we are shaping the future of the way that athletes talk about and think about cannabis.
That becomes the barometer for what society uses to set standards. Like, we follow the highest performing of the populations.
Yeah.
And so I think that we will shape the next generation's purview on the ways that they're able to embrace and utilize plant medicine.
Yeah, and I would say some of the fine print that was in the NCAA policy to remove cannabinoids was so powerful because they actually asked for education, not just for the students, not just for the coaches, but they asked for the broader campus community. That's essentially the NCAA saying we want college campuses to understand the latest research and science regarding athletics. And this is the NCAA policy. You all can look this up. It's on their website. But there's a 25-person committee that's in charge of drug testing, and they got a hold of the science and decided that the NCAA would be the ones to kind of take that forward. So it's just like when you have that, they're almost asking you to meet them there. And that's why we created the course ACEs, because there are scientists, some of them that are in this room that are published researchers that maybe people don't know of. And we realize when we bring those groups together, you have a much more powerful voice when we're behind a visionary and just somebody who people can gravitate to and relate to, such as yourself. So we have 2 minutes left. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
I mean, I just said it, just how important this work is. I've always been a fan of history, and to see us moving out of the prohibition of cannabis and to be a part of it, specifically related to sports, and to have attracted like-minded individuals to support the mission. I just feel very blessed, and back to the difficulty I went through, it all feels worth it because of the work that we're able to do now.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it for sharing that.
Yeah.
Did you want to leave with any last words?
You got it.
Cool. Well, we appreciate everybody for joining in. Thank you to the sponsors, Good Life Gang. Thank you to Beer Bros Farms. Thank you to Future 4200.
Yep.
Thank you for everyone who came out, Planet 13. Thank you for hosting us. And that's a wrap.
Yep.